In May 1940, the world prepares for a repeat of the Great War, a long, agonizing struggle of attrition defined by trenches and stalemates. On paper, the Third Reich is walking into a trap of its own making. The Allied coalition of France, Great Britain, Belgium, and the Netherlands boasts a staggering 3.7 million men ready for combat. They possess more guns, more aircraft, and nearly 1,000 more tanks than the German Wehrmacht. Furthermore, the French army is widely regarded by global intelligence, including the American and Soviet high commands, as the most sophisticated and powerful fighting force on the planet. Its generals are the victors of the last war, its fortifications are considered impregnable, and its armor is heavier and better armed than the German panzers. Yet in a mere 6 weeks, the unthinkable happens. The French state collapses, the British are driven into the sea, and the swastika flies over the Eiffel Tower. It is a military catastrophe so absolute that it rewrites the rules of warfare overnight and shatters the balance of power in Europe for years to come. In the aftermath, the world is left asking a single, haunting question. How did a numerically inferior force achieve the most convincing victory in modern history? To understand the fall of France, we must look beyond the simple tally of tanks and planes. We must look into a web of political hesitation, radical tactical gambles, and a psychological paralysis that gripped the Allied high command while their enemy improvised with a desperate, aggressive energy. The seeds of the disaster are sown in the autumn of 1939. Following the brutal partition of Poland, German Chancellor Adolf Hitler is in a state of frantic urgency. He knows his alliance with Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union is a marriage of convenience, one that could sour at any moment. He also realizes that the longer he waits, the more time the British and French have to mobilize their vast global empires. On September 27, 1939, Hitler shocks his high command by demanding an immediate invasion of the West. His generals are horrified. They remember the slaughter of the Western Front in 1914 and believe the army is not yet recovered from the Polish campaign. General Wilhelm Ritter von Leeb writes in his diary, "The French will not be surprised. They know very well that if the Germans attack, they must do so through Belgium. So the French will be vigilant. Our bloody sacrifice will be great. An attack on France cannot be done like the attack on Poland. Rather, it will be arduous and very costly." The professional officer corps believes the German army is not yet ready for a war of maneuver against a peer opponent like France. They cite shortages of ammunition, the fragility of their light tanks, and the lack of motorized transport. But Hitler is no longer listening to traditional military wisdom. He views his generals as timid and out of touch with the revolutionary spirit of National Socialism. He orders a plan, Fall Gelb or Case Yellow, and insists that it be executed as soon as possible. The initial draft of Case Yellow, prepared by General Franz Halder, is uninspired. It is essentially a modernized version of the 1914 Schlieffen Plan, a massive right hook through neutral Belgium meant to seize the Channel ports. It is a plan for a limited victory, not a total knockout blow. Hitler is visibly frustrated, sensing that the Allies are expecting exactly this move. The offensive is delayed 29 times due to poor weather, logistical failures, and internal bickering between the Nazi leadership and the army brass. During this hiatus, a stroke of fate changes history. In January 1940, a German Messerschmitt 108 Typhoon crashes in Mechelen, Belgium. On board are the secret plans for the invasion. The secret is out. The Allies now have physical proof that the Germans intend to strike through the Belgian plains. This accident forces the German High Command to reconsider a radical alternative proposed by General Erich von Manstein. Manstein suggests the unthinkable: move the main armored thrust away from the Belgian plains and into the Ardennes forest. The Ardennes is a region of steep hills, narrow winding roads, and dense timber. French intelligence and the Belgian military have long deemed it impassable for modern tanks. They believe that even if the Germans tried to move through it, They would be funneled into narrow valleys where they could be easily destroyed by artillery. Manstein's plan, which comes to be known as the Sichelschnitt or sickle cut, proposes that while the Allies are distracted by a secondary attack in the north, the mass of German armor will punch through the Ardennes, cross the Meuse River at Sedan, and race to the English Channel. This would cut the Allied armies in half and trap their best units in Belgium. It is a high-stakes gamble that ignores the danger of an open flank. General Fedor von Bock, commander of Army Group B, warns that the plan is a recipe for suicide. You will be creeping by 10 miles from the Maginot Line with the flank of your breakthrough and hope the French will watch inertly. You are cramming the mass of the tank units together into the sparse roads of the Ardennes mountain country, as if there were no such thing as air power. And you then hope to be able to lead an operation as far as the coast with an open southern flank 200 miles long, where stands the mass of the French army. Despite the risks, Hitler is enamored. He sees in the sickle cut the daring, revolutionary stroke he craves. On February 24, 1940, the plan is finalized. The stage is set for a collision of two vastly different philosophies of war, one based on caution and defense, the other on speed and total risk. While the Germans are debating a high-stakes gamble, the Allies are wedded to a strategy of defense and containment. The cornerstone of French security is the Maginot Line, a multi-billion-franc chain of fortifications stretching from the Swiss border to the Belgian frontier. It is a marvel of engineering, featuring underground rails, air conditioning, and retractable gun turrets. The French High Command, led by General Maurice Gamelin, assumes the Germans will not dare attack the Maginot Line directly. Instead, they expect the main German thrust to come through central Belgium, just as it did in 1914. Gamelin's response is Plan D, or the Dial Plan. The moment the Germans invade the neutral Low Countries, the best motorized units of the French Army and the British Expeditionary Force will rush forward to meet them along the Dial River and the Albert Canal. There is a fatal flaw in Plan D. It hands the initiative entirely to Hitler. The Allies will be moving their best troops out of their prepared defenses and into the teeth of an enemy offensive on unfamiliar ground. Furthermore, the hinge of this entire movement, the Ardennes, is left defended by second string. Poorly equipped reserve divisions composed of older men with little anti-tank training. Gamelin receives multiple intelligence reports suggesting German armor is concentrating near the Ardennes, but he dismisses them. He remains convinced that the terrain is his best ally, famously stating that the forest will protect the flank. On the eve of battle, the numbers are deceptive. The Germans have 2.8 million men and 2,700 tanks, many of which are light Panzer first and second models that are vulnerable to even small-caliber French guns. The Allies have 3.7 million men and 3,700 tanks, including the heavy Char B-1 and the Samua S-35, which outclass anything the Germans have in terms of armor thickness and firepower. The difference is not in the machines, but in the mindset. The Germans have concentrated their armor into specialized panzer divisions designed for independent, deep penetration strikes. The French, despite having better tanks, have scattered theirs across the infantry divisions to act as support weapons. At 5:35 a.m. on May 10, 1940, Case Yellow begins. German paratroopers and glider-borne troops drop onto the Dutch and Belgian frontiers. In a stunning display of modern warfare, they seize the Belgian fortress of Eben-Emael, which was thought to be the strongest in Europe. Using hollow charge explosives, the Germans neutralize the fort's heavy guns in hours. As Gamelin expected, the German Army Group B pours into the Netherlands and northern Belgium. Following Plan D, the Allied armies, the flower of the French and British forces, surge forward into Belgium to meet them. They believe they are fighting the main battle. In reality, they are walking into a giant revolving door. While the Allied eyes are fixed on the north, the real danger is emerging from the Ardennes. 7 panzer divisions, led by aggressive commanders like Heinz Guderian and Erwin Rommel, are snaking through the forest roads. They encounter massive traffic jams, with vehicles backed up for 250 kilometers, creating a target that could have been decimated by Allied bombers. But the Allied air forces are busy in the north, and the French command is too slow to process the reports of a massive armored column in the south. By May 12, the Germans reach the Meuse River at Sedan, the gateway to the heart of France. Gamelin is still unconcerned. He believes it will take at least 9 days for the Germans to bring up enough heavy artillery to attempt a river crossing against such a formidable natural barrier. He is catastrophically wrong. The Germans don't wait for horse-drawn artillery. They bring their artillery in the form of the Luftwaffe. Thousands of Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers scream down on the French defenders, their Jericho sirens creating a psychological terror that shatters the morale of the reserve units. The aerial bombardment is relentless, and though the physical damage is limited, the psychological impact is devastating. The French reserve troops, who have never experienced such a concentrated bombardment, break and flee, spreading rumors that German tanks are already among them. On May 13, German infantry and motorcycle units crossed the Meuse in rubber boats under the cover of the Stukas. By the 14th, the 1st Panzers are across on heavy pontoons. The hinge of the Allied line has been shattered. A captured French general, stunned by the speed of the collapse and the aggressive tactics of the German junior officers, remarks to his captors, "You are much too fast, it's everything, speed is everything." Once across the Meuse, the German commanders ignore their orders to stop and wait for the infantry. Men like Guderian and Rommel realize they have an opportunity to end the war in days. They don't turn toward Paris as the French expect. Instead, they turn west, racing toward the English Channel. This is the sickle cut in action. The panzers are moving so fast that even Hitler and the German high command become nervous, fearing their armored tip is becoming overextended. The French high command is in a state of total collapse. Their command system, which relies on landline telephones and couriers rather than radio, cannot keep up with the pace of the German advance. Orders are often sent to units that have already been overrun or have retreated miles from their positions. On May 15, French Premier Paul Reynaud telephones the new British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, and utters the words that would echo through history. "We have been defeated, we are beaten, we have lost the battle." Churchill is incredulous. He cannot understand how the world's greatest army could lose in 5 days. He flies to Paris to meet with Gamelin and finds the French government burning secret documents in the gardens of the Quai d'Orsay. When Churchill asks where the strategic reserve, the mass of troops kept back to counterattack a breakthrough, is located, Gamelin simply replies that there is none. The French had committed every elite division to the advance into Belgium, and now those divisions are being cut off from behind by the Panzer Corridor. On May 20, the 2nd Panzer Division reaches the coast at Abbeville. In just 10 days, the Germans have trapped over 1 million Allied soldiers in a giant pocket against the sea. Despite the strategic collapse, the French army does not stop fighting everywhere. At the village of Ston, a series of brutal tank engagements takes place. In one instance, a single French Char B-1 bis tank, commanded by Captain Pierre Billot, enters the village and encounters a column of German Panzer III and IV. Because of its thick armor, the German shells bounce off. Billot's tank takes 140 hits but remains functional, destroying 13 German tanks and 2 anti-tank guns in a single engagement. This shows what the French army could have achieved with better leadership and coordination, but these are isolated heroics. The German momentum is too great, and the Allied command is too paralyzed to capitalize on such local successes. By May 24, the Allies are compressed into a tiny pocket around the port of Dunkirk. The end seems inevitable. Then the panzers stop. The stop order at Dunkirk is one of the most debated decisions of the war. General von Rundstedt, worried about his tanks being bogged down in the marshy Flemish terrain and wanting to preserve them for the final conquest of France, orders a halt. Hitler, also anxious and wanting to demonstrate his authority over his generals, confirms the order. They believe the Luftwaffe, under Hermann Göring, can destroy the trapped Allies from the air. This pause gives the British 3 days to organize Operation Dynamo, the evacuation by sea. A call goes out for every vessel in Britain, from destroyers to fishing trawlers and private yachts, to cross the Channel. Between May 26 and June 4, a total of 338,000 Allied troops are rescued from the beaches. It is a miracle of deliverance, but as Churchill reminds the British public, wars are not won by evacuations. The BEF has escaped, but they have left every tank, every gun, and every vehicle behind. The French divisions who fought the rearguard to make the evacuation possible are forced into a bitter captivity. Simultaneously, political disaster strikes. On May 28, King Leopold of Belgium, seeing his country overrun and his army exhausted, surrenders without consulting London or Paris. The French are furious, and Renaud calls the king a traitor. The alliance is fracturing under the weight of defeat, with each nation looking to its own survival. With the northern pocket liquidated, the Germans turn their attention south. This is Fall Rot, or Case Red, the final destruction of the French army. The French have lost their best motorized divisions and much of their modern equipment, but they still have 60 divisions and a new commander, General Maxime Weygand. Weygand attempts to implement a new defensive strategy, the Harrisons or hedgehogs. Instead of a continuous line, which the panzers easily pierce, villages and woods are turned into all-around strongpoints meant to hold out even when bypassed. For the first few days of June, the fighting is savage. The French fight with the desperation of men defending their homes, and the German casualties rise sharply. Luftwaffe General von Richthofen notes in his diary, "The French are hard and tough. They've fortified all villages. Our tanks drive through, but the French lay low and pop up when our infantry tries to follow the tanks. Everything bogs down." But the German advantage in numbers, morale, and air power is now overwhelming. They have 2 divisions for every 1 French division, and they have total control of the skis. On June 9, the German breakthrough becomes general. The hedgehogs are bypassed and starved of ammunition. This phase of the war also reveals the dark racial ideology of the Third Reich. As the Germans encounter French colonial troops from West Africa, they react with barbaric cruelty. At least 3,000 African prisoners are massacred by the Wehrmacht and the SS after they have surrendered. When a French officer protests, a German officer explains that an inferior race does not deserve to fight such a civilizing race as the German race. As the front line dissolves, millions of French civilians take to the roads in a great exodus. 8 million people, a fifth of the population, flee their homes in a state of total panic. Roads are choked with refugees who are frequently strafed by German aircraft. The social order of France is disintegrating. On June 10, Italy, sensing the end is near and wanting a seat at the peace table, declares war on France. It is the stab in the back. On June 14, German troops march into an open Paris. The City of Light is silent, its streets empty except for the rhythmic thud of German boots. The French government flees to Bordeaux, where a bitter internal struggle erupts. Premier Renaud wants to move the government to North Africa and continue the fight from the colonies using the French Navy. But he is opposed by the aging war hero of Verdun, Marshal Philippe Pétain, and General Weygand. Pétain believes the war is lost and that France must seek an honorable peace to avoid total destruction and a potential communist uprising. He views the British as the true villains, accusing them of abandoning France at Dunkirk. On June 16, Renaud is forced to resign. Pétain becomes premier and immediately asks for an armistice. Hitler, in a move of calculated vengeance, insists that the surrender be signed in the exact same railway carriage where Germany had surrendered in 1918, in the forest of Compiègne. He watches with a triumphant smirk as the French delegation signs the document on June 22. The terms are humiliating. France is divided into an occupied north and a free zone in the south, governed by Pétain from the town of Vichy. The French army is reduced to a 100,000-man security force. 2 million French soldiers remain in German POW camps as hostages, used to ensure the compliance of the Vichy government. The Battle of France is over. It lasted 46 days. The statistics of the campaign are a testament to its intensity. The Allies suffered 112,000 soldiers killed and 2.3 million captured. The Germans lost 45,000 killed and 110,000 wounded, a heavy price, but small compared to the scale of the victory. The material losses are even more lopsided. The Allies lost nearly 3,500 aircraft and every scrap of heavy equipment the BEF and the French First Army possessed. Almost immediately, the blame game begins. General Gamelin blames the cowardice of the soldiers. Pétain blames the spiritual weakness of the nation. But the truth, as historian and resistance fighter Marc Bloch noted, was a total defeat of the intellect. The French High Command was fighting a 1918 war in a 1940 world. They were intellectually unable to react to the speed and power of concentrated German armor and tactical air power. The German victory was not inevitable. It was the result of a specific set of circumstances where a radical plan exploited a rigid, overconfident enemy. But Hitler's triumph contains the seeds of his eventual destruction. The speed of the victory convinces him of his own military genius and the invincibility of the Wehrmacht. He begins to believe that the blitzkrieg method can work anywhere, even in the vast, roadless depths of the Soviet Union. He overlooks the fact that his army is still 90% horse-drawn, and that his victory in France relied heavily on Allied errors that might not be repeated. He has gained a continent, but he has not defeated Britain. Across the Channel, a lonely voice rises. Charles de Gaulle, a junior general who had escaped to London, broadcasts a message to the French people on June 18. France has lost a battle, but France has not lost the war. Whatever happens, the flame of French resistance must not be extinguished and will not be extinguished. At the time, few hear him, but the world has changed. The United States, shocked by the fall of France, begins a massive rearmament program and a shift away from isolationism. The Battle of France was the peak of the Third Reich's power, a moment of seemingly total triumph. But in the grand arc of history, it was a hollow victory. 4 years later, the same roads in the Ardennes would see German armies retreating in ruins, pursued by the very forces Hitler thought he had crushed, the British, the Free French, and a mobilized industrial America. In 1940, Germany won the battle through speed and surprise. But they had not yet learned that a global war is not a single sprint, but a marathon of endurance. And in that marathon, the resilience of the democracies would eventually find the final word.